This is The Space Shot, episode 272 for February 9th, 2018. Part 2 of my conversation with Kelsi Singer and Joel Parker about New Horizons, Pluto, and the Kuiper Belt. I'm John Molnix. Yesterday you heard the first part of this interview. Now, let's dive right into part 2. So it's going to be like just peering back into what the solar system was like when it was forming.
4.5 billion years ago.
That's what we're hoping for.
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool.
So something that can help you get an idea of the relative distances is how long it takes for light to travel from the Earth to any object in the solar system. And it takes about like 8 to 14 minutes to get to Mars, depending on where the Earth and Mars are. Mm-hmm. And to get to Pluto, it was 4.5 hours at the time the spacecraft flew by. That's a lot longer. And by the time we get to MU-69, it's going to be about 6 hours and 15 minutes. So it gives you an idea of how much farther it is.
So crazy. Yeah, traveling at the speed of light.
That's a slow conversation.
No doubt.
Hello, and then you have to wait 12 hours.
Right, for it to go there and come back.
To have the, hi, how are you?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, we have to plan all the observations in advance. You can't control the spacecraft like with a joystick or something like that. So the spacecraft knows what it's supposed to do when it gets to the object.
So that's where the programming that everybody really knows how to do comes in. You're planning that down to the millisecond probably.
It's pretty small increments, but yeah, I don't think they do any observation for less than a second.
Yeah, seconds is our pretty much the tight tip.
Okay.
But that's, still seconds is enough planning to do for, a whole encounter.
And you have to make sure you get it right the first time, because you're flying by at, over 14 kilometers per second, over 31,000 miles an hour. And you only get the one chance, and you can't go, oops, I meant to do this. So you have to plan very carefully for both what you expect with enough variation in the plan for what you don't expect. Is there, like Kelsi was saying, is there another or more than another satellite around this body? Well, you want to be sure that you do observations over a large enough area to catch those extra objects. It may come back blank sky, but if there's another object there, this is your one chance to see it.
At what point in the approach can you not change any of the commands?
The basic plan is set many, many months in advance. We have scheduled in the plan time shifts where we can take like the central chunk and kind of move it forward or back as we approach and get a better idea of exactly where the object is. So we can kind of do a grow shift and fine tune. We do have a few retargetable periods, but the last adjustments we can make to trajectory and any things like that are
I want to say a month, weeks for sure, but
yeah, there's a final trajectory correction that can be within days. Mm-hmm. But
we do have our main set of observations, as Joel was talking about, but we make 2 copies of that. One for a closer flyby and one for a farther flyby. So the farther one we call the alternate, and the closer one is our prime, and we hope that we'll do the prime because we'll get much higher resolution images.
Okay.
But we do plan, since everything has to be planned in advance, we plan 2, and we make sure they're fully vetted and everything's perfect in those 2 plans. And then if we need to, we can choose the alternate if we see some kind of hazard to the spacecraft closer in the system.
A hazard being a ring, dust, little piece of dust can be the end of your spacecraft, or something else. The prime trajectory that Kelsi was talking about, the closest approach is 3,500 kilometers, which is much closer than Pluto by a factor of almost 4. The alternate trajectory, closest approach, is 10,000 kilometers, which is still closer than we flew by Pluto. So even if we fly our alternate trajectory, we're going to get higher resolution images than we got at Pluto. Smaller than Pluto, though, so we'll have fewer total number of pixels on it.
So that's why you're really wanting to get up close with that prime flyby plan.
Definitely.
We're in hibernation right now.
Okay.
I always say we.
I know, right?
That works. That works.
We
Seems like us
are the
personally.
spacecraft, it's the royal we in some way.
Yes.
Ironically, we're working a lot harder
That's
than
right.
the spacecraft right
The
now.
spacecraft is just hibernating. It's,
Yeah.
it's sleeping and every now and then gives a little beacon saying, I'm okay. And we're furiously planning. But in August, September, we will come out of hibernation and we will eventually go into what's called 3-axis mode, where we then can do specific pointing rather than spin stabilized. And certainly when we're doing the flyby, that's all 3-axis because we have all this fine-tuning specific pointing we need to do.
How has that changed from like the Voyager missions or even Cassini? Like, how has the accuracy changed for New Horizons, or is it going to be comparable?
The pointing accuracy?
Yeah, just in terms of that.
Not having been on those other missions or looked at this, I don't
Okay.
know what the pointing accuracy is, but certainly, for Voyager, they were flying by fast,
Yeah.
and they worked. It's all the same math, working out how fast you need to rotate the spacecraft so you don't blur the image during periods of when you're taking images. What the accuracy is, you have gyros and you have all sorts of ways of being able to tell what the attitude is, and you can use on different spacecraft, you can have reaction wheels, you can have thrusters, different ways of keeping the stability. And, it was, all you need is pointing accuracy that is good enough for the camera that you're using.
Okay.
Yeah, I almost wonder if it's more into almost the knowledge of the orbit of the spacecraft and the orbits of even the planets and the moons
Right.
that Voyager was imaging versus our knowledge of the orbit of Pluto and the orbit of MU-69, which we're working on.
Right.
So yeah, I almost wonder
That's
if
a
it's
good point.
if it's more on the side of not so much the location of the camera with respect to the rest of the spacecraft, but maybe the location of the whole spacecraft with respect to the body that it's imaging.
It should mention, the object we're flying by on New Year's,
Yay.
yay, is called 2014 MU-69. That kind of license plate number, the 2014 indicates the year it was discovered. And it was discovered with an amazing effort with the Hubble Space Telescope and members of the New Horizons team. And usually you need many, many, many years to get an accurate orbit of these objects out in the distant solar system. We didn't have many, many, many years to plan this. So we had to really get the orbit and position of the object to very high precision very quickly. And I think it certainly is the case that this is the most accurately known in the shortest amount of time of any object in the outer solar system. And even then, there's still significant enough uncertainty that we have to have that slop time I was talking about. So once the object can be seen from the spacecraft, we can adjust that a little bit. But the main problem is you can kind of tell as you're approaching kind of left and right where the object is, but close or far away along your flight path, you don't. It just looks like a point of light. You don't really have a clear idea along the flight path of where the object is. So it's really that down-track uncertainty that is your major uncertainty that you have to plan for. So you can imagine you're driving down a highway in a car and there's one tree you want to take a picture of, and you're not quite sure where that tree is, but you know you're going to pass it within the next 10 minutes. If you really want to take a picture of that tree, you just start taking pictures at the beginning of the 10-minute span, and then in one of those pictures, you'll have the tree. All the other pictures, you'll just have a nice field in the background. That's kind of an idea of what we're doing for this down-track uncertainty in the planning.
I've never heard it described that way. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually often think of driving for some reason. I think it's because you're often looking down the road and it's harder to tell,
That's right.
even where the cars are coming at you
Yep.
versus, a car that's on a perpendicular street.
That's right.
How far away they are and how fast they're coming at you.
Mm-hmm.
That is so cool. That just kind of blew my mind there a little bit.
Oh, good. That's our job.
Before our conversation ended, Kelsi shared one more piece about how they measure objects that are this far out in our solar system.
So it's an astronomical event called an occultation. And it's similar in a lot of ways to an eclipse, where you have to have the objects in the right alignment. But in this case, instead of, say, having the moon go between the Earth and the sun, we're looking at the object that we're going to, MU69, go between the Earth and a star. So it's very similar in the way that basically you wouldn't be able to see any dimming of the light or anything like that, because MU69 is so far away and the star is nothing like the sun in the sky. Obviously, the star is just a point. But it does basically cast a shadow, quote unquote, onto the Earth from the object passing in front of the star. So it's similar to an eclipse where you have to go to the right place on the Earth to be able to observe this event. An example I sometimes give is if you hold your arm out with a fist and you pick a light in the room, you would have to move your head around to get your fist to block the light. It's the same kind of thing. You have to be in the right spot on the Earth to see MU69 go in front of the star. But the reason we like to do this is because we can see the star blink out. And if we see how long the star blinks out for, that can tell us about the size of the object, because that's how long we know the relative motions of the two. And so we know how long it would take for the object to pass in front of the star. So it does sound a little crazy because this object is so small and so far away. But because of improved information about the position of the object that we got from the Hubble Space Telescope, and also, interestingly enough, you actually need to know the star positions really well. And we have more new information about that from the Gaia project. And that's something you can read more about if you want to. But they improved the positions of the stars. And so we just got that information basically last year. And without both of those pieces of information, we wouldn't be able to do this kind of occultation for such a small object so far out in the solar system. So it's actually the first time we've ever done something like this. And it's always really exciting to be part of a project where you're doing something for the first time.
Yeah.
That's New Horizons.
That's a lot of things on New Horizons.
Yeah.
Occultations are an incredibly powerful tool. They can tell you about detail on a distant object that you would never be able to see with the best telescope you have on Earth. The atmosphere on Pluto was discovered by an occultation. Pluto passed in front of a star. If it didn't have an atmosphere, it'd be like a knife edge. The star would just blink out and then blink back. If there's an atmosphere, it quickly fades out rather than a sharp cutoff, because the atmosphere absorbs a little of the light. So that's one way you can tell something about the atmosphere of a distant object that you wouldn't be able to see. Kelsi mentioned you can see the size of the object, but you can also refine the orbit and the position of the object, because as it is the case with MU69, we didn't know exactly where that shadow was going to fall on the Earth, because we didn't know the star position and the object position all that well. So the uncertainties is tens of kilometers at least. So you get all these little telescopes that you take out in the field and you put them along all these different positions where you think the shadow may cross. Some of them will see the shadow, some will see the star blink out, and some won't. And you can use that information to not only get the size of the object, but to refine the orbit.
So where is that going to be then? Where is that going to be observed from?
So
they already had one.
Yeah. We last year we had a couple of opportunities.
Okay.
So of course it just depends on whether there is a star that's going to be passing by the right angle to catch, to have the object go in front of it. And so we did 2 last year. One was in Argentina and South Africa. And then the second opportunity we went to Argentina, more southern Argentina for. And so we, as Joel said, we went there, we scouted out sites to be able to put up telescopes. We had all the telescopes shipped. It was a pretty big operation. We got a lot of help from local people, which we wouldn't have been able to do this job without that. And then we set up the telescopes about 4 or 5 kilometers apart, something like that. And that way we were able to cover a big area in order to catch the object.
Because how many telescopes?
Was it 25?
Something like that.
Yeah, it was about 25. It was a pretty big operation. Like
16-inch telescopes
Yep.
with GPS and all the bells and whistles.
This was the first time we've done quite this type of operation where we bring a whole bunch of telescopes and space them so close to each other. And because we did that and we happened to catch the object on the second try, we actually got 5 telescopes that observed the star blinking out. And so that meant we actually got to see 5 different parts of the object. And that's how we know that maybe it's an object with 2 lobes on it, or maybe it's 2 objects. And all of that information we got from this occultation campaign, you couldn't get that any other way. It's
very cool, and it's amazing. I mean, we're talking 16 centimeter or 16 inch telescopes. We're not talking Keck, multimeter telescopes doing science, getting the shape of an object 44 times further from the sun than the Earth is.
Yeah, I have to say it was a pretty cool event. I haven't participated in occultation before. This was my first one, so it's a pretty fun occultation to have your first one as your first one.
I've done occultation runs before, and you travel around the world. You set up for a 2-second observation, and it's cloudy.
Yeah, we got really lucky.
Oh man.
Yeah, no, we were very happy because we got lucky. There was a few scattered clouds, but almost no one had them interfere with the observation.
That's cool. I was in Beatrice for the eclipse, and it was rainy up to that point, and then it cleared for a little bit. It was like, yay!
No, it's the same. It's the exact same thing. You just go somewhere.
Fingers
you hope
crossed.
you get lucky, and
It's the life. If you're an observational astronomer in any way, you're ground-based. You're just a victim of the weather. And maybe some ingenuity if you have mobile telescopes and you have a good prediction.
That's right. Yeah, and when they went to South Africa for the first opportunity, they saw that there was a fair number of clouds moving into the area they were originally going to be in. So about half the telescopes threw everything in the back of their trucks and drove for 3-4 hours, something like that, to get to another area to try to have more chance of catching the object without clouds. So there's some kind of intense.
No doubt.
Intense driving experiences.
Kelsi has some great images of the occultation run experience for her presentation at the Cosmosphere.
Very cool. I wish I could be coming out for it. I can't come out for it, but I think we're going to be getting audio from the event at least, so I'll be able to hear that part. So I'm looking forward to that. Well, thank you guys for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. I hope
Thanks
to have
for doing this in your free time.
Exactly.
when you're not moving and
it's a little bit less stressful now. So I hope I can have you guys on in the future.
Yeah, that'd be great.
No problemo.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed talking with Kelsi and Joel, and I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as I enjoyed making it. Like Carla mentioned in the news section of this episode, be sure to check out a very unique date night on this Valentine's Day that's at the Cosmosphere. Thank you all for listening to the Cosmosphere podcast. Make sure you share and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. If you enjoyed the show, leave us a review on iTunes. Reviews are crucial to the success of podcasts, so we'd appreciate it if you could take a minute to leave a rating or review. Head to cosmo.org to become a member of the Cosmosphere, or to find out more information about the world-class education programs that are available for students and even adults. For the Cosmosphere, I'm John Molnix. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. I'd appreciate it if you could leave a review on iTunes. If you do that, screenshot it and send it to me at John Molnix pretty much everywhere on the internet, and I'll send you a Space Shot sticker and a little thank you. Also, make sure you hit the subscribe button, that way you don't miss any of the daily episodes. As always, the show notes have more information on today's episode. You can hit me up on Instagram and Twitter. Find me at John Molnix. I'm always up to chat. You can also connect with me on Facebook. Just search The Space Shot or click the link in the show notes and you'll find me. Tomorrow, SpaceX launches Discover. I'm John Molnix, and I'll catch you on the flip side.